When Ryan saw his car, parked in its rightful place, being unceremoniously hauled away in a tow truck, his patience broke. He was a police chief, a man who was used to order and justice, and now, after this bullying, was willing to break all the rules to regain his honor. But what he had set up in the HOA office had shocked not only them, but his own coworkers as well. They didn't know he was capable of such actions. But what happened next changed the rules of the game forever. Ryan Morgan was a man who always put order and discipline first. As the chief of local police, he was used to solving problems with calm precision, making decisions based on facts and logic. Each day started with an early morning patrol, analyzing the situation in the city, and addressing current issues. He wasn't the type to lose his composure easily, even in the most tense situations. But this incident was the one that made his inner confidence crack. That day, everything went wrong. Ryan had parked his car in one of the designated spots in the complex where he lived. It was a spot he'd never had any issues with since moving into the area. It was peaceful, and everything seemed in its place at first glance. But this time, everything changed. When he returned after a meeting and approached his car, he was met with something that stunned him. His car wasn't where it should have been. Instead, all that remained was a tire mark from the tow truck that had just left, taking his car with it. There was no warning, no explanation. No notice, nothing to justify the actions of the HOA employees who, as he quickly realized, were behind this. The moment he saw the empty spot where his car had been just moments before wasn't just unpleasant, it was the moment when everything inside him shifted. His calm demeanor, his usual confidence that the law was always on his side, was shattered. This wasn't a random incident or a mistake. This was an outright violation. Not just a violation, but an abuse of power. He knew this was more than a misunderstanding. The tow without warning wasn't just negligence, it was a clear act of disregard for people's rights, especially the rights of someone like Ryan, who was in a higher professional and societal position. As the police chief, he knew how the system worked, and he couldn't believe such things were happening in a supposedly lawful community. When he contacted the HOA office, his frustration only grew. He found himself in a heated argument with people who were dismissive of the situation. The answers were incoherent, their voices unsure, and they tried to justify their actions with vague statements about rules and regulations. He realized that these people didn't just make a mistake, they acted as though they didn't have to respect his opinion. As if, with whatever little power they had, they could decide who deserved respect and who didn't. For Ryan, this wasn't just a personal affront. It was a blow to everything he believed about justice being unwavering. He realized that these people, these guardians of order within their little system, had no accountability, no common sense. They had decided they could do whatever they wanted, thinking their decisions wouldn't be challenged. Standing in that empty spot where his car once was, Ryan felt a fierce desire to regain control over the situation. He knew that if he didn't act now, if he didn't put those who had wronged him in their place, others might face the same kind of abuse. But to do that, he needed to act decisively. This isn't a mistake, this is a systemic issue, he thought, feeling his anger rise. His sense of justice couldn't stay indifferent. Ryan knew that if this wasn't stopped, they would continue treating other residents the same way, tearing apart unity and fairness behind the facade of legality. And so, standing in the midst of the empty spots where cars once stood, he made up his mind, they would face consequences. He was ready to fight not just to get his car back, but to restore equality and justice for everyone. He couldn't allow these people to remain in their positions. He couldn't let them go unpunished. It hadn't been an hour before Ryan, weighing every word carefully, made his decision. At the moment when his anger still hadn't subsided, he realized this wasn't just a personal offense. This was a turning point, a moment when he needed to do more than just get his car back. He needed to restore order in this lawless corner where people, it seemed, had forgotten what respect for rights and the rule of law meant. He wouldn't be Ryan Morgan if he couldn't use this situation for something greater than mere satisfaction of personal revenge. As he headed toward the HOA office, his steps were confident, like a man who knew exactly what he was about to do. He understood that this moment would be decisive, and he wasn't going to leave empty-handed. His colleagues, who were in touch with him, had already reported that several key figures were at the office, the manager, one of the senior association members, and a few technicians. Ryan also knew this meeting wasn't going to be peaceful. His intentions were clear and unwavering, no compromises. He entered the office, feeling the cold atmosphere hanging in the air. A few employees in the reception area tried not to meet his gaze, but he didn't let it distract him. He made his way directly to the manager, who was sitting behind his desk, confidently sorting through papers. As soon as Ryan spoke, his voice left no room for doubt. "Today, your association violated my rights. And not just mine, but the rights of anyone who trusts these rules. You can't continue doing business like this, and I'm not going to tolerate it," he said, his words sounding like a verdict. The manager flinched. He was a man who was used to feeling above everyone else. He was confident in his immunity, in his untouchability, and this was the first time he felt vulnerable. He tried to justify himself, but every word came out weak, a faint echo of his own confusion. Ryan didn't listen. He hadn't needed explanations from these people for a long time. His anger was pure and precise, like a lightning strike. "Your association is abusing its power. The people who made the decision to tow my car need to be held accountable. I'm filing an official complaint and I will do everything I can to ensure that everyone responsible for this incident is fired." Those words hit the desk like heavy bricks, and the manager, struggling to gather his thoughts, couldn't hide his confusion. He tried to say something, but only stammered, searching for some kind of defense for his staff. His words were weak and incoherent. But Ryan no longer paid attention to his excuses. He knew that this moment couldn't be missed. With his connections in law enforcement, his status, and his ability to manipulate situations, he knew he could make this work. He could have settled it quietly, gotten compensation, and forgotten about the incident. But his decision was different. "I'm not going to turn a blind eye to what's going on here. This time, I stand with the law, and each of you who tried to bend it to your will regret it." His voice became firm and resolute. He stared at the manager, not giving him a chance to defend himself. That look, full of confidence and determination, left no doubt, he was ready to go to the end. He knew that with his experience and position in law enforcement, it wouldn't be hard for him to ensure that those responsible would face consequences. He couldn't let these people keep their jobs without facing the repercussions. In his mind, a plan was already taking shape. Ryan knew that in order to change things, he had to make his actions an example for others, that everyone would know, abuse of power would not go unpunished. And so, in this office, where each of these people still believed they were untouchable, Ryan, more than ever, felt on top. His revenge was cold, calculated, and he knew he wouldn't stop until justice was served. When Ryan made the decision to take action, he wasn't the type to waste time on meaningless talks or pointless compromises. He knew that to make a real change, he needed to strike hard and fast. So, his first move was clear and decisive. He filed a formal complaint with the Homeowners Association HOA board, demanding an internal investigation. With the weight of his position and determination, he was confident that his complaints wouldn't go unnoticed. But what he encountered next was something unexpected. It turned out that his complaint was just the latest in a string of similar grievances from other residents of the complex. These people didn't have the same resources Ryan did, but they had long been at their wits' end. And when someone capable of making a change finally appeared, their voices were finally heard. Ryan quickly realized that this wasn't just about his car, the issue was deeper. It affected the entire complex, the whole system that was not only inefficient but also dangerous for all the residents. A few days later, the investigation officially began, and the results didn't take long to surface. During the investigation, serious violations were uncovered in the HOA staff's operations. Unjustified tows, rude treatment of residents, and disregard for basic safety rules, the list of violations was long. Each new revelation was more shocking than the last, and each fact brought them closer to the point where accountability would finally fall on those who thought themselves untouchable. Sitting in his office, Ryan listened with a smile as the reports about the investigation's progress came in. This was the moment when his decision had paid off. He knew his actions had been precise, like a well-placed shot, and now all that was left was to wait for the consequences. A few days later, the HOA board announced their final actions, firing all staff directly involved in the incident. This wasn't just a formality, everyone who had been involved in the towing of Ryan's car was fired without the possibility of return. The manager, who had considered himself the unchallenged authority of the complex, was the first to leave his post. He was forced to resign, which served as further proof that justice finds its way, even when it requires effort to unearth. Temporary suspension of several high-ranking association members. No one could be left out. Those at the top, including the members of the HOA board, were temporarily removed from their positions while the full internal investigation continued. This was a critical step in restoring trust and proving that the HOA would have no place for those who thought they were above everyone else. Implementation of a new system of accountability and transparency. Last but certainly not least, the association was forced to completely overhaul its operational methods. New rules were introduced, requiring transparency in employee actions, mandatory reporting, and regular checks. From the manager down to the technicians, every step had to be documented and available for review. For Ryan, this wasn't a moment of triumph, but rather a step toward restoring justice and order in his community. His actions didn't just lead to the punishment of those responsible, they laid the groundwork to prevent something like this from happening again. He understood that fighting the system was hard, but not impossible. He managed to do it not only for himself but for everyone who, like him, had once fallen victim to lawlessness and injustice. When the investigation was over, Ryan felt a sense of lightness. He wasn't someone who sought fame or recognition. His goal was simple: to return control to the hands of honest people, to restore trust to those who had lost it. And he had succeeded. A week had passed, but the weight of the incident still seemed to hang in the air. Ryan wasn't the kind of man who found comfort in the ease of victory. To him, this was far more significant and profound. He wasn't seeking revenge or satisfaction from the punishment. His actions were solely aimed at restoring justice, at bringing back the order that had been disrupted by people who had forgotten that their power was not a privilege, but a responsibility. When Ryan finally got his car back, that moment symbolized not just the return of his property, but a small victory. He parked it in the very spot that had once been taken from him. But now, that spot wasn't just for his car. It was a sign that the system, despite its flaws and shortcomings, could work correctly when it was met with the right intervention. He looked at his car, parked without the fear of unjust towing, and felt a lightness in his heart. It was the moment when everything he had gone through finally made sense. He didn't care whether anyone would praise him. He knew he had done what was right. More importantly, he knew that now the system would work the way it should, because those who had abused their power could no longer do so. The HOA now knew that Ryan was not someone to be taken lightly. He had proven that he wasn't afraid to fight those who thought they could manipulate people and the law. He showed that justice couldn't be bought with money or power. He had restored what had been lost in the system: trust. And that was the most important thing. The system had been restructured. The changes that started with one incident had now become part of a new order. Ryan wasn't an idealist. He understood that any system, especially one that deals with people, could fall prey to mistakes and even corruption. But what mattered was that those mistakes didn't go unpunished, and those responsible were held accountable. Now, the residents of the complex felt more secure. Those who had once endured humiliation and injustice now knew their rights were protected. And when the new manager took office, he immediately understood that if he wanted to keep his position, he had to act honestly and transparently. Otherwise, Ryan, this steadfast and determined man, would do whatever it took to restore balance once again. Ryan didn't hide his satisfaction, but he didn't fool himself either. He knew that victories don't come without effort, and every day in this system required vigilance and responsibility. But he was ready for it. He had become a symbol of the fact that even in the most difficult situations, justice could be found. And most importantly, one should never be afraid to fight for it. When Ryan returned to his work, his colleagues, seeing his calmness and determination, knew that he was a man who would not back down. And now, with everything in his life back on track, he felt that the world, even if just for a moment, had become just again.